What's going on, guys? In this video I'm actually going to share a couple of my thoughts on the Glock, and this goes for Glocks in general, not just Glock 19 or the Glock 34, which is two examples that I'm going to be giving you today. But this is just, like I said, a quick discussion. I do want to know what you guys think, so at the end of the video or even during the video, feel free to leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. So basically what this discussion is going to be about is whether or not Glocks are outdated. With that being said, let's get on with it. Alright guys, so like I said, I'm going to be talking about some of my thoughts on whether or not Glocks are in fact outdated, or at least starting to get outdated. And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. And yes, I think they are at least starting to get outdated, to be, a little bit conservative here. But in a nutshell, I do think Glocks are starting to get outdated. When you look at, here's an example of an older version of the Shield, the 1.0, if you will. I think overall, it's got a nicer everything compared to a Glock. And the same thing goes for, say, a SIG. Here's a SIG P22, P320, excuse me. And overall, it's got a nicer everything compared to the Glock. Now, taking Glocks into consideration, Glocks are actually really good guns, very reliable and everything like that. However, I don't know one person who is an actual, firearms enthusiast, if you will, that has a Glock that is still stock. In every situation that I know of right now, everyone that I know that is a firearms enthusiast or a Glock enthusiast or a gun enthusiast or whatever, what have you, whenever they have a Glock, it is always customized to some extent. When you look at things like the grip angle to a Glock, I know it's very commonly discussed. The grip angle to a Glock is very weird. It's very, slanted that way. When you look at, for example, SIG P320, the P320 kind of, pretty much just goes straight down from the firearm, whereas the Glock, again, goes kind of slanted in that direction in probably like a 15-degree angle or something like that. Of course, I don't know exactly the angle, but if I was to put a guess on it, it's probably like 15 degrees of an angle. Basically speaking, whenever you see a Glock, at bare minimum, you see it with brand new sights. This one right here has the Trigon night sights. Great, sights and everything like that. Love them. However, the stock Glock sights are pretty garbage. Basically speaking, the factory sights that they come with is plastic, and whenever you hook it onto something and try to rack it back, there's a big possibility that they can break simply because they're made out of plastic. Now, this gun is clear, nothing in the magazine and nothing in the chamber, but these guns, as nice as they are and everything like that, they're still starting to get outdated. When you have companies like SIG that already have metal sights, or even M&Ps that come with metal sights, this is just not acceptable, in my opinion. You're getting the same priced firearms with better things already that come with it right off the bat. Now, that's just the sights. When you take into consideration the serrations, the back serrations are decent at best, but it's not acceptable. When you look at guns like M&Ps, this is the Shield, obviously this has the fish scale type. This is very grippy, and the 2.0s have a little bit in the front, so you can actually do it on the front as well. Now, this obviously is not the 2.0. Again, I've said it before, it's more like the 1.0, if you will. But even at this level, I still think it's a better quality gun than a Glock. I know you guys are probably gonna hate me, but don't hate on me or anything like that. I do love Glocks, but I think there's better options for the price. Now, again, these fish scale serrations on the M&P are fantastic. I think they're really good. Serrations. And the same thing again with when you look at SIG, these are very much more defined, and you get forward slide serrations as well. So, and this is in the same price range as the Glock. This is the compact version of the SIG P320. This is one of its competitors, the Glock 19, and they're priced the same, and you get more with the SIG than you do with the Glock. You get metal sights, and you get better serrations on the back, but also you get serrations on the front. So that's, again, not acceptable by Glock at all. When it comes to the grip angle, I don't tend to worry about that too much. I think that's more of a training thing than anything. You tend to overcome that with practice. So the more you shoot a Glock, the more you'll get used to the grip angle, and you know, it'll just be fine. But something you do get a lot of people, you know, talking about or doing with their guns is either getting, like this Glock 34 has Talon grips on it. A lot of people with their Glocks tend to put some sort of a grips, or they go with the stipple job like I have here on my Glock 19. Either way, most people do, or a lot of people I should say, do some sort of a modification with their grips. Even something as simple as taking off the finger grooves. I know in my case, my hands were kind of big for the finger grooves, and right in here, where I put this little undercut, it actually, you know, my hand wouldn't go high enough to get a comfortable feel with the finger grooves on the Glock 19. The Glock 34, I don't have an issue with it as much as I did with the Glock 19. However, it still goes to this, you know, same argument. A lot of people still tend to remove the finger grooves off of the Glocks, and again, I think that's more preference than anything. However, you have companies like, again, the SIG that already has the more desired, if you will, grip angle with no slide or finger grooves, with a thinner trigger guard, so that you can actually get a higher grip or you know, purchase on your firearm than you do with the Glock. Now, of course, people are going to argue that this has a high bore axis. I don't think that's much of an issue in my opinion. However, it is a valid point. You know, because of its axis, it does tend to, at least scientifically, you know, put more of the inertia going upwards instead of straight back as you do with the lower bore axis, thus having the gun ride up a little bit more, creating what's called muzzle flip. Is not that noticeable. I'm going to be 100% honest, especially when you get a good grip. It's not really noticeable when you actually get a good grip on your firearms. However, Glocks, I think that's something that they actually did right. They have a lower bore axis, so it really does feel good, especially when shooting. It feels very natural because it pushes straight back on your arm versus kind of having some of the inertia go up. But other than that, I really think, you know, Glocks are starting to get outdated. A lot of companies nowadays are not worrying as much as they did before on overall longevity of the barrels and stuff like that. And with that being said, the barrels on Glocks are also starting to be outdated now, in my opinion. You know, a lot of barrels nowadays are starting to come with, you know, traditional style barrels and everything like that, whereas this has, I think it's called the polygonal chambering, which is cool for reliability. You know what I mean? It's got looser tolerances on the inside and everything, so it makes a little bit better for feeding and extracting, you know, ammunition out of your barrel. However, you do sacrifice accuracy a little bit, and for those that do reload their ammunition, you're gonna have a lot, you know, more buildup with lead and stuff like that inside of your barrel with a polygonal style barrel. So a lot of people do this modification, which is, you know, basically changing out the barrel. This is a KKM barrel, fantastic barrel, very accurate. I've never had any issues whatsoever with it. But this is another modification that, you know, people do. It's a lot. Now, if you start adding everything up, by the time you get a Glock to the point, say where the SIG P320 is, that has more of a standard 1913 style Picatinny rail versus, I think this is like, I forgot what they call this style of a rail, but you'll find that it's a lot easier finding, you know, attachments for a traditional rail than you will some of this. Now, with the amount of time that this has been out, it's not much of an issue. However, it still goes back to the same fact as before that I was saying, that it's a lot, I guess you can say, better to have more of a traditional rail on your pistol than something like this. Now, I'm not necessarily against it, but I don't run flashlights or anything like that on my Glock 19 or my Glock 34, so for me it's not a big issue. But either way, it's still something to consider. Another thing that people like to do, again with the customization of their Glock as well, they like to do what's called a double undercut, or even an undercut under here. People, there's this infamous word that people with Glocks have, or is known to be told, and that's what you call Glock knuckle. So in a traditional Glock, as you can see right here, this one has been unmodified. It's very thick right here, and a lot of the times when you shoot, it starts to hit your knuckle over time, making it very red and uncomfortable over time. So what a lot of people do, as you can see here, as I did, they'll cut it where it is higher and a little bit more open, so that when you shoot, it actually won't interfere with your knuckle. On top of that, they cut right here in the front so that you can use that as your finger, or for your finger, you can use it as an index point for when you actually get it, when you apply your grip onto your pistol. Now, this is one of those things where, again, it's preference. It depends on how the gun feels to you. On a Glock 19, I did have, Glock knuckle quite a bit, so this was a definite necessity for me to do this undercut. Something else that people like to do is this cutout right here on where the magazine goes. As you can see here, when you grab a magazine and you put it in, it creates a little gap so that whenever, say, you have like a double feed or something like that in your magazine, you're trying to swap out mags or something like that, and it'll be stuck. To get a purchase on your magazine, it would be a little bit harder with a regular standard Glock bottom right there, because of how it is. It's pretty much flush to this magazine, so getting a purchase on the actual base plate of the magazine is very difficult. So a lot of people cut it out so they can get a better purchase on it, so ripping out the magazine is a lot easier. Again, some companies are starting to come out with that right out of the factory. Take the P320 for example. It already has a natural cutout in the frame itself, so that you can actually do that too. As you can see, makes it very easy to get hold of right there with a magazine. And on top of that, it sits pretty flush, so it actually has a pretty good aesthetic to it as well. So I think SIG did a great job with this pistol. Another thing people do is replace the trigger. I haven't done that on either one of my Glocks, either the 19 or the 34. But that is definitely something people tend to do, and that's usually one of the first mods people do. Now, the stock poundage of a Glock pistol is about, I want to say 5.5 pounds. That's I'm just guessing on that. I don't remember the exact poundage, but if I was to guess, I think it's about 5.5 pounds or something like that. But the reason they replace it is not necessarily for the poundage. It's about the grittiness and the spongy feel of the Glock trigger while you're pulling back. It's, in my opinion, it's very inconsistent, feels pretty sloppy, and I think it's a no-go. When you have guns, again, like the SIG, that has a fantastic, factory trigger right off the bat, it's just unacceptable when you have a similar priced firearm like the Glock 19, but you get way better quality. And aesthetically, I mean, it's a no contest. The SIG looks way better as well. Speaking of aesthetics, the Glocks tend to have a very blocky look. I don't hate the look of Glocks, especially when they're highly customized, but realistically speaking, it does have a very blocky look, and it's a turnoff for a lot of people. Again, I don't dislike them, but I mean, there's no arguing against it. It looks very blocky. There is a lot to hate on a Glock pistol, and that's why they have a lot of haters. However, that's not to say 100% bad things about the Glock. Glocks are fantastic pistols. I have shot thousands of rounds through Glocks over the span that I've been shooting, period. I have shot thousands and thousands of rounds through Glocks, and seldomly do I get a malfunction. And when I do, is generally not a big malfunction. Or another thing, if I do get a malfunction, it's something I created. So, you know, sometimes when you modify guns, sometimes you get like a spring that doesn't work right with your pistol, and that will create some issues like failure to extract, for example, or something like that. But either way, Glocks are fantastic pistols. I don't want to necessarily knock them down, but I do want to say Glocks are starting to get outdated very fast, if you ask me. When you have guns like the SIG or even the M&P, you know, this is the, again, 1.0, but the 2.0s are fantastic guns. The triggers are better on the 2.0s. It's got front serrations and everything is just, and they kept a very similar, if not the same price point as your, you know, typical M&P or even a Glock pistol. So I think it's unacceptable for a Glock to not be as innovative as other companies have. Now they are starting to make moves, but I think it's not enough. For example, on some of the newer Glocks, they actually added forward or front serrations. And again, I do not think that's enough. I think they really need to redesign some of their pistols and really make a statement for Glock again. Not necessarily on the functionality or the way the actual firearm functions, but maybe just something as simple as an aesthetic uplift on, say, the slide, or even a custom, you know, frame or something to please the gun community. SIG did something similar with their X5 series. I don't have an X5 to show you, but their X5 series actually has a different frame that's skinnier, and just a lot of, you know, little upgrades that make a big difference aesthetically to the firearm, that makes it look like almost as if it's a completely different pistol, but it's the same firing control unit. So it still is effectively a SIG P320. This goes back to the Glock. Glock has been making moves like having the MOS with the slide cutout and everything like that, with different plates and everything like that. But when you have, again, guns like SIG that already comes with an optic already mounted on your pistol, the MOS still seems outdated compared to, you know, the SIG. Now, I know it's starting to sound like I'm very pro SIG, and I'm being 100% honest here. I am very pro SIG. It's one of my favorite gun companies out there, but I do like Glock a lot. I would be lying if I told you I didn't like Glocks. But if you were to compare a Glock to an M&P, I would choose the M&P. If I was to compare the Glock to a SIG, I'd probably, you know, well, there's no probably, I would go with the SIG. Very few guns, I think, are less than a Glock nowadays because of its lack of innovative creativity within Glock itself. But again, that's not to say anything bad about Glock, or at least I'm trying not to say anything bad about Glock, because they are fantastic firearms. This is one of the most reliable firearms I have ever shot in my life. Again, very seldomly do I have any issues with it, so I don't want to say anything too bad about it because it's not a bad gun whatsoever. If you want to buy a Glock, buy a Glock. I actually recommend the Glock 19 to a lot of people for their first time buyers and stuff like that. But nowadays, since a lot more companies are starting to be a little bit more innovative, I think it's probably better for the average person to just go with a different choice. And with that being said, I definitely want to know what you guys think down in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, smash the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.